if you found out you were being lied to? What if someone held back information? Would you accept it? Why lie? Are you ready for the truth? Shalom and welcome back. We're going to continue on as our learning as we do here. You see me smiling is because I have something very happy to tell you. Okay, I got my truck back. So you're going to see a video I'm going to post up which is going to talk about it. I'm not going to post all the information here. I'm going to leave it for the desire for those who are going to go, you got to click on the new video. Alright? Anyways, I'm just joking with you. Anyhow, but it's another video we posted after this video and stuff so you can see what happened and what was going on. I'm excited. I can finally retire my shoes for the moment and start using the tires for my traveling needs. I don't have to use my 3,000 miles shoes. The rubber kind of wears down on these things over time, obviously. And so I'm thankful. I'm happy. And thank you for all your guys' help. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate how much you guys, out of your heart, willfully help me. And I just want you to know that. Thank you so much. So, I'm happy. It took for a long time for me to get my truck. But like I said, I'm going to leave all those details for the next video. So, we are now going to be continuing our lesson as we had done in relationship to our leaving out of Egypt. Going out of Egypt, departing from Egypt, walking away from Egypt. And we're going to continually focus on this subject here because this is so important for us to understand that just as we got from learning about Pesach, now we're getting into the functionality of how do we keep ourselves in that state of Passover, okay? How do we keep ourselves focused on that state of getting out of Egypt and walking away from the Mitzrayim? And we have to understand, remember, it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It doesn't happen in just a moment. It's a process. And the beginning of it is following Mashiach. The beginning is believing and understanding that Mashiach is the Lamb that has become our atonement. For God to remove the wrath from upon us and to protect us and to cover us so that we can walk in His ways and we can be delivered and we also can be saved. So, in the last segment, when we were reading, we were talking about how the children of Israel basically had a few things that took place. Number one, they crossed over the Red Sea. And when they crossed over the Red Sea, there was the whole major issue of the fact of here they had this massive miracle that takes place, and then all of a sudden, what happens next? The dissatisfaction attitude of not having water. And looking at it from the wrong perspective and seeing their trials from a wrong perspective. And then after that, the Bible goes on to talk about them not having food and about the attitude of them, how they were lusting over the pots of food that they used to have back in the old days and back in the times when life was good and we had many multiple things. And we begin to see that there's this continuing theme that God is trying to break away from our lives. And number one, that's not judging the things that we're dealing with from the negative perspective, but trying to find the good in everything that we go through. And number two, we find is the issue of when we see the fact that God is putting us in a certain situation for a reason, we have to look at and ask ourselves, what is this regarding to and what's this to teach us? And this is really important for us to really put in our hearts and know. And we really want to sit there and find the good in everything, because you know what? It's easy to find negative, but how much hard is it really to find the good? You have to search and look deep in a situation and say to ourselves, what good is there in this? What positive is there in this? So the Torah, as we begin to learn, is going to continue on this lesson of our getting out of Egypt and seeing the more of the ideologies we need to have to put into our heart how are we to function. And it makes sense when we look at the Torah that we have the beginning of what the Torah teaches us, where we have what happened in creation, why was our world created, what was the issues that took place in the beginning of creation. We have the lives of righteous men who walked and kept Torah. We have the downfall of humanity, which walks away from Torah and stands in opposition to the commandments. We have God sparing the families and stuff, and during the time of the flood and during the time of the Tower of Babel, uprises that take place. Now we get to the heart and soul here, where we get to the point of realizing the fact that here, all this journey we've seen these families interact and have these dysfunctionalities and these problems. And here we see this heart issue that's being spoken of here is, we need to get out of Egypt. We need to get out of our spiritual bondages. We need to get out of our spiritual dysfunctionalities and get into a place of functioning properly. And this begins the journey of what gets us into understanding the importance of our leaving Egypt, and why is it that we struggle with many things, what dysfunctionalities that we have as we've learned along the way in the Torah. So with that being said, let's begin. Adonai, Lord God, deliver us from the enemy. Deliver us from the plots of the enemy. Deliver us from the attacks of the enemy. Help us to walk in the ways of Torah. Break every single negative thing off of us and help us to walk in the way that we ought to. Deliver us from our struggles. Deliver us from the areas that we are in bondage to, the things that we are struggling with, the things that are considered consistently over and over again, these areas that just break us down and make us dysfunctional, make us not function the proper way that we need to be. Help us to walk in the ways of truth. Help us to do what's right and keep the Torah, and to follow Mashiach Yehoshua, who is the one who sits on the throne in heaven, who will return soon. Amen. The Torah says, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, the Lord said unto Moshe, Ad ana ma'atem lishmo mitzvotai v'toratai. Until when, ma'atem, did you refuse? Now this is an interesting thing, because we see here it says ma'atem. Ma'atem here is the past tense of refused. And the question that Hashem is asking when he says to Moshe, he's referring to, why is it that Israel is refused to keep the mitzvotai v'toratai? Now what does he mean by refusing to keep the mitzvotai v'toratai? The Torah tells us that when Hashem was saying this to Moshe, he didn't mean literally that they were purposely just trying to violate the Torah, but rather that there was a dysfunctionality of not observing the Torah properly. Because what's one of the biggest problems we have in this world when it comes to the issues of observing and doing things? We always find that there's these stupid ideas that pop in our head, and we start convincing ourselves that these ideas seem legit and logical and sound. And we start to think, why don't we do this? And it really, what it is, the Bible tells us, is Satan's trying to tell us to do something wrong. We listen to this stupid idea that he tells us, and we think the idea sounds logical and makes sense, emotionally is appealing, and we find ourselves being stupid by sinning, okay? And Moshe is talking about the very thing of what happened was, because when we read earlier, the Bible talked about that on the Sabbath, that they were told that they were not to go out and collect food, right? And so what happened was, is people decided to say, you know what, maybe we can find some food and gather more and collect it and keep it so we can have a bigger hog, right? Maybe these are the ideas that people have, right? Maybe the ideas of the fact of like, maybe we should only do this under these circumstances. Maybe this is okay to do in that circumstance. And these are the different ideas that different people have, and they think, yeah. And they're convincing their mind that, this could be the possible reason why they should do this. It's just like people today, when I've listened to some people and they've told me stories about their lives. They were like, but I just don't feel like, I don't feel like that, it's a violation of Shabbat if I work, because I am taking care of the family, and if I don't work, they won't get a paycheck, and if they don't get a paycheck, they won't have the money they need, and so that is kind of a pekuach nefesh issue, and they create all these different ideas that are false, but they're trying to justify it by using ideas that have validity to them. And what I mean by that, so is it pekuach nefesh a validity idea? Well, sure it is. If a person is dying and needs help, God tells us to protect that person from dying, correct? Okay, that's a real thing. Pekuach nefesh is a real thing. But what is he doing with this? He's polluting the idea of pikuach nefesh by trying to make it look like that his whole family is going to fall apart if he doesn't work on the Sabbath, and that he's going to be, hurting the family, and all these things are going to happen, all this negativity is going to happen, and therefore he creates this false identification of it by utilizing these terminologies. So when Hashem said to Moshe, Ad ana, until when ma'atim did you refuse? Lishmor, to keep mitzvotai v'toratai. Alright? So the question when we look at this, when it says adata, until when, it's asking the question, at what point in time was the mindset made that you decided no longer to just observe the Sabbath as according to what you were taught? Okay? That's the concept that we find from the Hebrew here. Then it says, Ro'u, ki Adonai naten lechem, for the Lord is given to you, HaShabbat, the Sabbath, Al Ken, therefore, Hu noten lechem, He's given to you b'yom HaShavi'i, the 6 days, Lechem Yomayim, bread for 2 days, Shavu ish tachtav, return each man to his place, Ve'el yetzei ish mimkomo, and let a man not come forth from his place, b'yom HaShavi'i, on the Sabbath. So, we have to understand something from this passage here is the fact that, first off, the Torah is making us understand that there's a prohibition of going outside and doing things on your own on the Sabbath. Okay, collecting, working, doing an occupation. Okay, so Moshe gives the standard that there is also another thing that we have to understand, which is another prohibition, which is that going outside of a domain. Okay, the Torah says here, if we look at this, it says shavu, return. Return means that a person could come back. You got to understand this, what return means. Remember, because if it said, let a man go back to his place, then it would say, okay, he's only allowed to go back to his place. If he's here, he can go back to his place. To say return means that you can go from a place and then return back. So we have to understand this. Ish tachtav, each man tachtav. Tachtav means the place that you are at. Okay? So it means return to the place you're at. So that refers to the fact that the Torah is teaching us that if a man is living, for example, we have to understand this in context. So actually what we'll do is we'll make an example of this here on the board. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to make this diagram so we can go through this and kind of understand this, because it's important to see this. So I'm going to blow this up a little wider so we can see a bigger picture of the board. And I'm going to angle up a little more here. Alright. Okay, and turn this. Okay, here we go. Alright. So, we have to understand the issue of domain. Okay? So we're going to pretend that this box here represents your house. Okay? So this box here represents your house. This is what the Torah is teaching us. Okay? So I'm going to put a little roof on this little thing so you can kind of get a little idea here and say, oh, okay, cool, a little house, all right? This box represents your house here, okay? Now, the Torah teaches us that if a man lived in what's called a walled city, okay? So a walled city would be, here's this man, he lives in a city. We're going to make this city, small, so we can kind of scale down a bit, right? And we're going to pretend that that's the entrance to the city, okay? And we're going to put little houses here. I'm not going to make things beautiful and perfect. I'm just going to make it simple, right? Okay, we're going to pretend that this guy here has got a big house. He's a big rich guy. He's got a big home, right? And this is the city, okay? The Bible tells us that if we are inside of a walled city, all right, then everything inside of this is considered a private domain. Now, this is using English terminology to explain something, okay? Because the concept of what we call private domain, we're referring to the concept when we look at this thing. Meaning, if I come outside my house, for example, we're going to put this guy, he's going to be outside the house, and he's going to have his little piece of bread, alright? If he walks outside of his house, He can walk anywhere he wants to throughout the whole city, and everything inside the city is considered an open area, okay? And nothing, even if this city we're going to say is, I'll just put it like this. I'll put a quarter mile long, and we'll say 3/4 of a mile wide, okay? So just pretend that's the size of the city, but it has a wall around it, major wall, huge wall, right? Covers the whole sector of it and stuff, right? So the wall goes around the whole city, okay? This, the Torah says that if we were to go outside of the wall, right, there's a length that's called 2,000 amot, okay? Which is alpaim ama. That's how you would say it in Hebrew. So alpaim ama. So 2,000 amot is alpaim ama. And this is considered from outside, once you get to that alpaim ama place, that line, okay, there's a visible line, okay, which goes in every direction, right? That you're not allowed to go past the 2,000 amot once you leave the city, okay? Because everything outside here is considered basically an open area, okay? There's nothing out here. You can even have, for example, a guy, let's pretend that he has a tent, okay? The guy has a tent out there, okay? Maybe this guy over here, he's got a wagon that he left out in the middle of the field and stuff. Doesn't matter, okay? It's still considered open area, okay? For Israel, at the time period, all right, we have to understand that this would happen when you're in a city, right? And you can only go outside the city 2,000 amma, okay? So here, we're going to pretend that this guy, he has his tent out here, okay? He wants to go to the synagogue that is inside the city. We're going to say that the synagogue is right here, okay? Because this is within 2,000 amot, all right, or 2,000 amma, alpaim amma, he can walk inside the city, go to shul on Shabbat, and walk all the way back. The thing is, he can't take anything with him. He can only take his body, okay? That's it. So whatever he has clothes-wise, his body, he's wearing, he can go 2,000 amma into the city, go to shul, and then go back to his tent, okay? And he's not allowed to carry anything. If he's in here, the private domain, he can carry the books that are in here. He can go to this house over here and study for a little bit and stuff. Once he leaves the city, he can only go back to his tent. You understand that? He can't carry anything. He can't bring anything with him. That's all he can do, okay? And the issue we have to understand, though, which is in relationship to what took place in the wilderness, okay? The wilderness has a unique issue, okay? Because in the wilderness, as we're going to see here, the wilderness was different because here we have tents all over the place, all right? We have sukkahs, and we got tents, all right? So, in the Torah, as we're learning here in relationship to this segment of Shemot, Moshe said that if a man was in this tent, for example, and let's say you had a guy named Yonah who had a Torah scroll and he had a huge tent, many people can come and be at his tent. Everybody who lived in these different tents, alright, we're going to pretend there's a bunch of different tents, okay? As long as the distance from here to here is 2,000 amot or less, this guy could walk, right, over to his tent. Since Yonah is going to have the Torah scroll, alright, everybody can sit down and hear the Torah scroll being read in his tent, okay? Yonah can walk all around the tent with his Torah scroll. He can jump up and down with the Torah scroll in his tent, right? But when the time is over, then everybody's done with learning and studying, okay? The man has to go straight back to his tent. And let's say he has a Torah scroll in his tent, but he can't bring it on Shabbat. So he keeps it in his tent, so after he's done learning here, he comes back and he studies Torah again. Okay? This is what it means when it says, Shavu ish tachtav. What is tachtav? This is tachtav. Tachtav refers to the place that he originates at. Okay? In Hebrew, the word tachat literally means in place of. Okay? It has to do with the concept here and the concept of where he is placed at. That is the place. Okay? Why does it say shuv? It's because it's telling us that he's allowed to go to the makom, right? Which is the tent that he's going to, and he's allowed to return. That's why the Torah says shuv, right? Shuv. Shavu, I gotta say plural. Shavu ish tachtav, alright? Shavu ish tachtav, right? So the word shavu, this is referring to the fact that his tachtav is his dwelling place he lives at. He's allowed to return. He can leave it, go to the makom, which is why it says, El Yetzei, and unto the place that he goes out, ish mimkomo, from his place. So this is mimkomo, this is the mimkomo place, right? Mimkomo, right? This is the makom right here that he's referring to. He's allowed to go out from the place b'yom hashvi, on the seventh day. All right. So this tells us that you can walk from your place of origin, which is the tachtav. You can go to the place that you're going to learn Torah, as long as it's within 2,000 amot, which is mim kamo. And shavu, you can return back to your place, but you can't carry. Okay, carrying is forbidden on the Sabbath. You're not allowed to have anything. You can't have a backpack. You can't carry. Anything that you can wear is permissible to take with you physically. Okay, so if you have glasses you need to have on so you can see, you are physically wearing your glasses. You're permissibly able to go. Okay, so for the man to go from here to here and back, this total journey is a total journey of a total of 4,000 amma. Okay? Because what you're doing is you can't go past the 2,000 amot distance, but you can return, so that gives you a total of 4,000 amma of distance. 2,000 amma to go, and 2,000 amma to return. You follow me? To return. That's an and, by the way. And that's an R. No, there's an R. Return. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So that's what the Torah is telling us here. So Moshe made a distinction to tell the people, because what happened was when the people went out to gather, he said, listen, you have to understand something that you're not allowed to carry on the Sabbath. Okay? So he made it clear to the people had to understand that they can go from their tent to the other tent, but they can only return back to their tent. They can't go over to Nehemiah's tent over here. They can't go to Eliezer's tent over here. Each of these tents, which are at least within 2,000 amot, these people can leave their tents and go to a tent, but when they go, they have to leave the tents and go back to their own tent. So that's why they can't just go and travel as far a distance, whatever that they're wanting to. Okay? So it's very important for us to understand this and stuff and keep ourselves focused on everything we're learning right now. Okay? So the Torah says b'yom hashvi'i, on the Sabbath day. Okay? Vayishaftu hayam, and the people rested b'yom hashvi'i, on the Sabbath day. Now, the the Bible tells us that really what Moshe says in this relationship here is not everybody actually did. Why? Because once again, when it came to Moshe telling them what they were to do, people kind of look at it as like, that's Moshe saying it. Is it really from what Hashem said? I don't know. And this is where people started still questioning Moshe. You understand that? The Bible tells us it wasn't until Har Sinai, when God spoke to the people, that they really freaked out because they realized that God was speaking to Moshe. You understand that? And that was where they really freaked out. When God revealed himself, that's when he said, yep, I was talking to Moshe, he tells us. And they freak out because they realize that Moshe was really hearing God's voice the whole time. Okay? So we get to the point of realizing that why was this situation important to understand versus the other situation which we see is different. Okay? The other situation is different. When you have a walled city, or if you have a fenced tent area, you can do anything you want in that fenced tent area. Okay? As long as it's fenced off and everything's surrounding there, you can walk outside, you can go outside, you can carry outside and carry inside and go back and forth, right? As long as it's fenced in, right? Once you go past that fence, you can't carry anything. You understand that? So the children of Israel, because of the tent situation and because of the sukkah situation they had in the wilderness, everything was a big, wide open space, all right? So that meant that people collaborated before Shabbat as to where they were going to have a Shabbat service. Because notice the Torah says Mikrei Kodesh. It's a holy convocation. So that means that it's a necessity if you can, not required if you can't, but it's a necessity if you can to congregate. So how do you congregate? Well, you have to be able to walk to the place, all right? If I can walk 2,000 amma, nothing more, everything less is wonderful, then I can go to the place and learn Torah at the shul, right? If I can't, because the shul, the actual synagogue back in the days of Moses, was the tents. You know that? The tents were the synagogues. And that actually goes all the way back even further in time when we go back to reading what the Torah says. Because what does the Torah talk about with regard to Noach? It said that Yafet would dwell in the tents of Shem. So we know that the dwelling place of Shem was considered a synagogue. Okay? The dwelling place of Noach was a synagogue. Because what Noach did, he would teach the people, he would instruct the people. Abraham did the same, Yaakov did the same, and now we know that the synagogue, which the tents were, was the actual place. So when people try to say, for example, that synagogues today is a man-made thing, you're really mistaken. The synagogue has always existed in history, and it was the place that you would go to sit down. Moshe calls it the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. He would have people come to his tent, he would teach people Torah in his tent, and that became the place that people would gather and learn Torah. It's always been this way, okay? So when you hear about synagogues being built and things like that and stuff like that, you're talking about the same thing. That's why if you look at Jewish communities, okay, when you're looking at a real full-blown Jewish community, for example, in New York or maybe Los Angeles or Jerusalem or some other place, they're going to have some kind of eruv around the city so that these people can all walk back and forth from house to house and go to the different synagogues that are there. Or they live in Jerusalem, for example, that has a walled city, okay? But any Jew that lives in a place where there is no city, a roof, and there is no wall, he stays home. And this is what the Torah tells us that we're to do, is we're to stay home if this becomes the issue. So sadly enough, the Torah tells us that actually not everyone was keeping the Sabbath, and this was causing obviously friction within the growing Jewish community. Because here you have people who are coming out of Egypt, right? Moshe's telling the people to leave Egypt, to walk away from Egypt, all right? And yet people still want to stay in Egypt because the attitude of keeping the Torah and keeping these commandments, they start rebelling against. They start bucking and kicking, and we start finding these are called the Anshe Milchama, the men of war. Because the Torah refers to the men of war as the men who are standing in opposition with the Torah says, and they're causing other people to be dysfunctional. They're not causing the people to keep the Torah, they're causing people to question should they keep the Torah, they're causing people to walk away from Torah, and that's why they're called Anshe Milchama, men of war. Okay? So the Torah goes on to talk about and says, V'yikra bet Israel, and they called the house of Israel Et Shemo, its name, Man. Okay, so house of Israel called its name Man. Vuhu Kizera Gad Lavan, for its seed was like coriander. Lavan. What does Lavan mean? Lavan doesn't literally mean white, just so you know this. It means a light color. And see, many people think, what, Lavan's white? It's not white. The Lavan's a light color. Coriander seed is what? It's an actual tan color. So if you actually understand that Lavan, it's referring to the light color of the actual, it's like a light yellow-brown coriander seed. Tamu, and its taste was ki tzafit chit b'devash. It was like flat cakes with honey. So it was very tasty for those who kept Torah. The people who enjoyed the Torah, who kept the commandments, they loved eating the man that was given to them in the wilderness. So it says, Vayimer Moshe ze hadavar. Moshe said, this is the thing, asher ziva et Adonai, which the Lord commanded, melo ha-omer, the fullness of the omer. Remember, the omer is what? It's a half an ephah. Mimeno, from it, let me shmer for a charge, ladortechem, for your generations. Laman, in order, yiru, the people of your halechem, they would see the lechem, asher he'echalti, which I fed etchem them, b'midbar, in the wilderness. Behotzi'i, when I bring forth etchem you, meretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt. So God told Moshe to take an omer of this and to place this as a remembrance. So if anybody question and say, the children of Israel didn't eat manna, Moshe could open up and show the people and say, are you really going to fight? This is it right here. So the Torah tells us that the manna was held as a remembrance throughout the generations, and that it stayed inside the actual areas we learn later to become the ark, where it was put in there. So the Torah says here, this is, so the people obviously who see were the ones who would fight. These are called the Anshe Mecham, and men of war. So the Torah says, Vayimer Moshe el Aaron, Moshe said to Aaron, Kach tzintzenet, take the container, echad, v'ten sham, and place them in Meloha Omer, the fullness of the Omer, man, hanach, and rest oto it, lifnei Adonai, before the Lord mishmer, for a charge, l'dor take throughout your generations. Ki asher tziva Adonai el Moshe, and it says, as the Lord commanded unto Moshe, Ve'nechehu, and he rested Aaron, lifnei ha'idut, before the testimony, lemishmer, for a charge. U'bnei Israel achlu, and the children of Israel ate et haman, the man, arbaim shana, for 40 years, ad boam, until the coming el eretz no shavet, until the land of their inheritance. Et haman, and the man, achlu, they ate ad boam, until the coming el Ketzei Eretz Canaan, until the edge of the land of Canaan. Ha'omer is Isirit ha'efahu. It is a tenth of an ephah. So I know I said half of an ephah. It's actually a tenth. I'm sorry about that. I did mean to correct that. So the omer is an Isirit ha'ephah. It's a tenth of the ephah. Okay? And so if you wanted to ask the question, like, what is the tenth of an ephah? This is something that obviously is not commonly spoken of and stuff, right? So what is an omer? An omer in today's terminology would be equivalent to about 4.32 liters, or about 18.26 cups. So that's obviously a lot of flour if you think about what the man was, okay? And it's so important for us to understand that this is what the Torah is telling us here in this issue, and in relationship to it. So now when we continue on further, as we continue further in our studies here, we're going to go on and start with chapter 17 in this part here. As the Torah says, Ve'esu kol hadat, and they traveled all the congregation, Bnei Israel, b'midbar Sin, in the wilderness of Sin, lamasehim, for their journey, al pi Adonai, according to the mouth of the Lord. So God was the one who told them when to move forward, okay? And it says, Ve'ichanu Rephidim, and they camped at Rephidim. Ve'ein mayim lishtot ha'am, and there was no water for the people to drink. Now notice this. You find this, that here are the people that just gone through these different trials already, right? They went across the Red Sea. They spent 3 days looking for water. They couldn't find it for 3 days. Then the Bible says they had abundance of water, but now they had no food. And they complain about not having food. So God gives them manna instead of the fact of them having to worry about, any kind of food. They get manna in the wilderness, okay? But the people, what do? They get tempted in eating quail and rebel because they want to have the meat and the fatness of what they thought they had. They had all this glorious life they felt they had in Egypt. And of course, many people died because of eating the quail, all right? So then the people had man, and the people were told to go collect the manna. And the people then, as they were being told to collect the manna, some decided, I'm going to go out on Shabbat and go collect manna. And when Moshe said, don't. So you notice that you find people rebelling and rebelling and rebelling and rebelling, which goes to show, did they really in their heart want to keep the Torah in the first place? Did they really in their heart want to leave Egypt? That's the thing we start looking at, okay? So then we get to the point where here he tells them, okay, don't go out of your places, and this is how you're going to travel on the Sabbath. And the Bible tells us, once again, people still violated Shabbat, okay? Then you get to the point where they couldn't find water, and what does it have? It says, V'arev ha'am im Moshe. The people quarreled with Moshe. V'amru, and they said, Tanu lanu ma'im lishtot. Give to us water to drink. Vayomer lehem Moshe. Moshe said to them, Ma tiravun. Why? Now it says, what will you refute imadi with me? All right? It should say lama. All right? We could say lama tiru. Why will you refute imadi with me? Lama tanasu et Adonai. Why will you tanasu? Why will you test the Lord? Okay? Now, notice this thing here. Is two things are being brought up when we look at this, because ma and lama should have been the thing, but he wrote ma. So let's look at what he says here, okay? So number one, he says, ma tirivu imadi, what will you refute with me, right? Meaning, Moshe was making the stance, what are you going to do to fight against this? What's the new argument you're going to create? Then he says, ma tanasu Adonai, what will you test the Lord? Right? So notice the fact that, God was the one allowing the mime not to be found. You understand that? He allowed this to be a test to see, would the people's hearts do righteously or would the people's hearts do wickedly? Okay? So here we find that two things are happening. Number one, we find that when Moshe said something, it was as if God himself spoke it. So we have to understand that, because Moshe was hearing God's words and passing them from God to what God told him, and he was passing them to the people. And so basically, we learn from this passage in the Torah that what a man of God, we see Moshe, he was a man of God. We say Moshe was the leader of Israel. We see Moshe was appointed to be the sage over Israel. We know that if a sage of Israel who follows God correctly and does the things that Hashem says correctly, that you are to follow him as if God himself spoke it. That's what we learn from the Torah here. Because notice he says, what is it you'll refute imadi with me? And what will you test the Lord? So he referred to himself as being someone that they were refuting with, but he did not refer to himself when he said about testing. So we notice the fact that he wanted to make it very clear that instead of the fact that the people thinking that they're just fighting Moshe, Moshe wanted to make it clear that they're not fighting only him, but God in heaven, who is the one who gave Moshe the commandment. And therefore, that issue that they were refuting was not just Moshe alone. And that's because Moshe wanted to make it clear that the refutes that they were making and the attitudes that were trying to do and trying to oppose what he was saying was to be something to be understood, that Moshe was not just the person speaking on his own accord or just speaking by himself, but that Moshe was speaking on behalf of what God taught him. And therefore, to refute and stand against Moshe, you were not refuting a man, even though you were standing in opposition to a man, even though you were arguing with a man, you were ultimately standing in opposition to what God had said to this man. And that's the thing that makes it very clear. This is why we find that the issue of when a prophet like Moshe was speaking, you're not to speak and get so quickly to judge the things that is going on and taking place. Because you could ultimately be standing in opposition to what God had told that prophet to do or say, or to go in the direction the prophet was told to go do and say. So these are the things that we find from here, is that the people are actually fighting not just Moshe, but ultimately they were fighting God, because God was the one who told Moshe what to do. So it says, V'imtza sham, and they thirsted there, ha'am, the people, lamayim, for water. Vayeled ha'am, and the people complained al Moshe, against Moshe. Vayimer lama ze alitanu, why is it that you've ascended us mimitzrayim, from Egypt, la'amitoti, to kill me, ve'et banai, my children, ve'et miknai, and my livestock, betzama, with thirst. So notice that Moshe got a beating from people, okay? Moshe got a beating from people because they wanted to make it look like everything that he was doing was as if he himself was doing it on his own accord. And that goes to show you the fact that the real messed up mentality the people had, because throughout the journey, as we see in this thing, we see that that's how they treated Moshe, as if Moshe was doing all of these decisions just on his own desire to think, yeah, I think it's a good idea, I'll do this. Okay? Moshe makes it clear that God showed Moshe what to do. God showed Moshe where he wanted him to go. God showed Moshe where he wanted him to camp. And so Moshe was angry and mad because he saw that they were looking at him from a very physical standpoint. They were not looking at him from the standpoint of realizing that he was the vessel that God chose to speak through. They just looked at him as if he was doing this on his own accord. They got mad at him when he took them to the wilderness, and the first thing they find is they couldn't find water for 3 days. They got mad at him because when he took them to the Red Sea, they wanted to complain and make it as if like he had trapped them and got them stuck, and that they were about to be killed by the Egyptians. They got mad at him when all of a sudden the food shortage was taking place and all they had was water at the time. They get mad at him again now because now there's a water issue. And here the thing we find becomes abundantly clear is that God was the one causing these events to happen, and every single time they took it from a very physical standpoint. They wanted to make it look like it was all his fault. It was all Moshe who was doing this. It was all out of Moshe's idealisms and thoughts. So what happens here? The Bible says, V'yitzach Moshe Adonai, Moshe cries out unto the Lord, Le'emor, saying, Ma'aseh lehem, what shall I do for the people hazeh? Od ma'at selakuni. In a moment they would kill me. So Moshe was afraid that he felt this attitude of possibility of, I don't know if they'll kill me or not, but I feel really concerned that these people just want to take me out. Because anything I say or anything I do, they keep blaming me as if I'm the fault for all these issues, as if I'm just this idiot guy who's just doing whatever I want, leading these people in a direction that's going to get them killed, and everybody's mad and angry at me for these things, and that's what Moshe felt. And we find from the Torah that obviously this is how we get led out of Egypt, which is the weird thing, is we find that people, when they're really following the true gospel message and they're being told by the people that are teaching them correctly these things, that negative things start happening in their life, and what do? They start turning it on as if like maybe there's something wrong with that person that I'm listening to, why all these bad things are happening right now. And they're not looking at it from the perspective of maybe God's brought you into that position in life because he's trying to get you out of your own spiritual Egypt and you're blind to it. Because we see that as Moshe had to deal with this fighting action, this fighting words, these constant conflicts, these pressing attitudes of the people, he himself also got to the point where he was scared to even go and teach the people concerning anymore, that he thought he was going to be killed. He had that fear in his heart, thinking, man, they're going to kill me, man, this is ridiculous. Here I have 600,000 people, and I got a whole horde of people mad at me, and they're thinking it's all my fault that I'm trying to kill them, and it's all these issues that I'm doing, it's all my issues. And so what happens is, V'emer Adonai el Moshe, the Lord said to Moshe, Avor lifnei, cross over before the people, V'kach itecha miziknei Israel. So here God takes Moshe, and what does he do? He wants Moshe to overcome his fear of death. So what does Moshe do? Moshe crosses before the people. He's afraid, thinking they're going to kill him. So God tells him to go before the people so God would make him overcome his fear of death. So he crosses over the people, as he's told, and he says, Kach itecha miziknei Israel, and take with you from the elders of Israel, umatecha, and your staff, asher hikatabo, which you struck in it, ed hayor, the Nile, v'kach biyadecha, and take in your hand, v'halachta, and you shall go. Hine, omer lifnecha, behold, I am, he says, standing before you, Sham al Hatzor, there upon the boulder, Bechor at Horeb, Vihikata, and you shall smite Batsor in the actual boulder. So he was told to pierce the boulder with his staff. That's why the Torah says Hikata Batsor, to smite in the boulder. V'yatzor mimenu mayim, and there shall go forth from it water. V'yashata ha'am, and the people shall drink. V'yasken, and he did thus Moshe li'nei ziknei Israel, before the eyes of the elders of Israel. V'yikra Shem hamakom, and he called the name of the place Mas Mariva. Why did he call it Masa Mariva? Masa means testing and refuting, because the people tested and refuted. Al-Riv, over the refuting of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. Va'al nesotam, and over the testing the Lord. Le'emor, saying, Hayesh Adonai b'karbenu ve'im en. Is the Lord in our midst, and if not? So notice this, that God became angry with Israel. And he yet still his passion of mercy. And what did he do? He had Moshe take his staff and pierce the rock with his staff, which means a miracle happened, because wood can't pierce rock. So a miracle happened that when he went and smote the rock, that literally his staff went inside to the rock. And when he pulled it out, water comes gushing out of it. And the Bible says the reason why the people had to experience this is because they doubted all of the miracles God had done before, questioning everything that God had shown them in their journey, and were basically saying, is the Lord in our midst or not? Because why? Because instead of looking at everything God had done throughout their whole life, as they left Egypt, they still were questioning whether or not God was in their midst. Whether or not God was performing all those miracles that showed them that he was really taking care of them, that he was pressing against them to see what was in their hearts, by which they themselves were not willing to see at the moment. And the Torah begins to tell us that this issue here is what caused the rise of the next thing. And we'll learn that next time as we continue forth our lesson. I'll see you next time.